Hello, Peter. How is it going with you today?
Hello, Pierre. Nice to see you again. Good. It's going fantastic. Thank you.
Long time no see, I must say, because
Indeed.
the funny thing, I'm really excited to do this podcast today, Peter, because we obviously used to work together, but it was a very long time ago, back in the BetSafe days, like
Yes,
10 years ago.
exactly. Yeah. 10 and a half. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So that
yeah.
was in 2011 exactly. So yeah, it's some water on the bridge and then a little bit more gray hair on the sides. So yes, you're absolutely right. But it was a blast.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's been a long time coming, and it's a very long time ago we spoken. So I'm really happy that we managed
Mm,
to connect through this podcast again. And obviously through
yes.
this decade, a lot has happened in this industry. And I remember back in the day at BetSafe, like how how rudimentary the systems that we worked with were back in the day.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, obviously you work on the other side of the fence now,
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
these 10 years, a lot has happened, I would imagine, in these processes.
Exactly. Let's if we were to do like a 10-year review, it would be like a very, very long session. So yes, a lot of things have happened. But and some things have stayed the same as well, right? So like from my point of view, like in this industry and as in many others, like the only constant is change, right? So
Yeah.
so every day we see new things popping up left and right, from the different territories, from regulators, from providers, from new innovations. So it's truly exciting industry to be part of.
That's absolutely true, Peter. So yeah, I mean, rather than looking backwards today, I guess today
Hmm.
we are going to be looking forward. And the
Yes.
topic of today is predictions for 2022. What will
Hmm.
be in
Hmm.
trend and what will develop further? I thought it was a
Hmm.
good topic to have today as we draw to a close in this year. And I mean, in general, 2021 has been incredible year for the industry at large. I
Yes.
mean,
Yes.
US is expanding.
Hmm.
There's movements on the regulatory front. NFTs, cryptocurrencies has become a thing. It's
It's
been a it's been
exactly.
an it's been an incredible year. I mean, from your perspective, I mean, Peter, you're
Hmm.
the head of country managers now for Soft2Bet. Like, can you
Correct.
like how has the year been for you in general?
But like I would say similar, right? So I would say hectic, fantastic, ever changing, new things to look after. So yeah, it's been an intense year. So myself and I think the rest of the teams are looking forward, hopefully soon, to a little bit of relaxation and like to kind of like try to take in all these things that we actually accomplished this year. So it's been an exciting year. And like 2022 is looking even brighter, I think, from our side, at least from our perspective, from an industry point of view. Like, first thing I would like to mention is that there's a
Yes.
Danish, like a famous Danish proverb, or like a saying, that like predictions are difficult, especially
Yeah.
about the future, right? So that, like, with that in mind, like when if we do like a revision of this podcast in a year's time from now, I will bet you the only thing we will accomplish from this is looking a little bit foolish, baby, because
Yeah.
there's no way of like being able to predict. It's like educated guessing, I would say,
Yeah.
rather than maybe predictions, right? So that's kind of like the backdrop of it. But let's try. Let's give it a try and
Yeah.
see how many we can get right.
Good disclaimer here, Peter, and a very good point. When we look back at this, we might look a bit silly, but I mean, it's much easier to predict the past than what it is to predict the future. I guess that is what your
Exactly.
brilliant Danish proverb is alluding to.
Yeah. Exactly.
But yes, I mean, let's look forward now then,
Mm.
Peter, into
Mhm.
2021. Like I said, to me there is a lot of underlying interesting trends that is happening within the industry right now that, in my opinion, and we've been speaking about this a lot in the podcast throughout the year, will
Yeah.
decide kind of who are the winners and losers in the
Mhm.
future. There's a lot of decisions
Yeah.
that is being made, like big
Yeah.
strategic decisions. For
Mhm.
example, as a tier 2 operator, do you go full force into the US, for example? I mean, that's a
Mhm.
big strategic decision that is happening
Yes.
right now,
Yeah.
with not a clear cut answer, what is the right decision, but we will see these decisions coming into fruition for next year. So,
Yeah.
it's interesting to have this discussion now. But as a starting point, speaking about America, why don't we start by looking at some regulatory predictions for 2022? And I'll just leave the word over to you, Peter. Like, what do you see as like? I mean, it's a big question. Like for example, we have Canada now. The UK is reforming their their gambling act. Germany obviously is on everyone's mind. US, Latin America, Netherlands, Nordics. I mean,
everything
many fronts of things happening. Yeah. What do you think?
But I would say, again, I think this is like the global trend, so to speak, right? So we see so many markets now are moving from like a deregulated state or like from a monopoly state, and going into this transition of putting some legislation in place to kind of try to find some order in this chaos that the iGaming industry is in some markets at least, right? So I would definitely say, like, looking ahead to next year and what will happen. Obviously, more markets will kind of like catch up. I think, like you say, US is a good example, right? We will see more states that will introduce this legislation, either for sports betting or casino or both. So how? What I see, at least from my side, is like the differences between the two continents of Europe and the US, like in like the whole approach to the gambling industry, how it's perceived, how it's being talked about by like in the general public discussions, right? I think there's like a big discrepancy. So one of the things to keep an eye out for is like how the conversation about iGaming will kind of like transcend. We see, at least in some markets here in Europe, I wouldn't say a toxic atmosphere, but at least some resistance from like the political sphere, from the media side of things, in terms of like the coverage that the industry gets. So how that will look for the US, will it still be all of these like sunshine stories of new partnerships or joint ventures and new introductions of legislations, or will there be like a backlash that we have seen, at least in Europe in recent years, in terms of like a more negative tone towards gambling and like the industry as a whole?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point in the sense that if we compare Europe with North America, and I just came back from New York the other week. There was a major gambling conference, and really interesting because the culture is totally different from the North Americans to the Europeans. And you know, for example, in Europe, we talk about iGaming and online gambling as one product that encompasses all these different verticals like sports betting and casino and so on. The Americans are very careful dividing the expressions between exactly, and they call it sports betting and iGaming, for example, which is a different term. And you know, they approach it in the culture over there is like, if you do some sports betting, that is not gambling to the Americans. They see that as part of their culture. Like you put you place a bet in on the NFL game, and it's very like intertwined with their general culture in general. But the moment you mention online gambling, then you know the alarm bells goes up a bit as well, and it's quite interesting.
And I mean, I think we saw like the same patterns as well in Europe. Let's say, again, going back to where we started 10 years ago, looking at a market like my home market, the Danish market, when we went through this regulation phase, online gambling, or in this case, like the online casino product as a whole, was seen like very like it wasn't a product that was engageable for a whole like wide audience of players, right? It was something you didn't talk about. Whereas now, over time, we've seen it like gain traction in terms of popularity with players. So now it's become more, I would say, socially accepted to play online casino. There are still some stigmas associated with it, but it's going to be interesting, like you say, like how will this transition be the same in the US as well? Will they again catch up a little bit to where we are in Europe? And how will they handle it, basically?
Yeah, exactly. And I moderated a panel. I was at the WGS, the executive conference in Barcelona. I moderated a panel that was really relevant to this, what you talk about, it was titled "What Can the American Operators Learn from the European Counterparts?" And one of the discussions on that front is like, the regulatory and cultural headwinds that we've faced in Europe. What can the Americans learn from that? Because obviously,
Yes.
right now the industry is somewhat flying under the radar, I would say. I mean, we haven't seen like the backlash from the general
Exactly.
populace the same way as we saw in Sweden, for example, a couple of years ago, due to the massive advertisement, like the really aggressive advertisement campaigns that we saw in Sweden, that really generated like a massive backlash that then led to kind of political intervention and so on. And the Americans are interesting in that regard because they have been able so far, at least, to build some of the major brands, like the DraftKings and the FanDuels and so on. They have been able to build their brands in a way where they are seen as quite cool rather than nefarious.
And like those guys obviously also had a different starting point than from actual sports betting, right? So they had again, it was more like a pool betting approach they had to it through fantasy, like fantasy sports, which is like product wise is a slightly different and has some different things associated with it, at least in my view. So they have also gone through this transition, and those guys that you mentioned there, like FanDuel or DraftKings, like they've been able to maintain, as far as from what I can see here from across the pond, like that cool image in terms of like how they communicate, how they engage with their audiences. Like they have huge, massive social followings on their channels. They have, from what I can see, again, like high engagement to their posts. So again, they've been able to maintain like the good positive vibe about the industry, even through this transition. But like you say, like the differences again, and like what can they learn? The US operators from Europe, again, I would say having a more proactive approach in terms of player protection tools, having a more proactive approach towards like the KYC processes, the AML stuff. So we avoid these, again, situations that we have seen, for instance, in the UK with operators getting massive fines for either like failing on their player protection duties or the AML stuff, which is, again, it's becoming a global trend, like this increased focus on AML policies, which funds do we accept, do we actually know where they're coming from, all these processes. And again, it comes from a global trend. Going back to my home market, Denmark, we had a lot of negative press also worldwide for AML breaches from payment institutions, from well-renowned Danish, one of the biggest banks in Denmark, a few in the Nordics as well, right? So all this stuff is coming like on the agenda, which then goes into the political agenda, which feeds into the media agenda. So it's like, it can be, so if the US operators can kind of like tackle this head on, get the processes straight, avoid these like bad cases that we have seen here in Europe, I would say that would be a major help to themselves in the long run, even though like introducing these things would most likely have a negative impact, at least initially, on their businesses. But if you like keep, again, maybe 10 years headlight, or 5 years, or even 3 years, like how the positioning in the market, if we don't have this in place, is to be seen. It's exactly. That's where we can see, again, a negative backlash of the sorts that we have seen here in Europe.
Exactly, it's like repeating the same pattern in a way that we can already predict. We can already predict what's going to happen, and I think Paul Leyland talked about that as well, which is like, as long as the industry flies under the radar, everything is okay. But the moment these reach a political level and the masses start setting demands on the industry to improve itself from a responsible gambling point of view, the damage has already been done, right?
Exactly. And then like we cannot avoid negative stories. They will pop up, right? There will be bad stories. The thing is that we need to show that it's not a systemic failure, that it's not like the industry as a whole that needs new enforcements or measurements being introduced, but that we can actually proactively handle this. So again, like those would be my best advice for the US operators for sure.
So like I guess another like regulatory wise now looking at Europe, a trend that seems evident to me right now is that there's a lot of headwind in Europe at the moment from regulatory point of view. There isn't that many good stories, let's say, that are coming out at the moment.
No.
What do you think, like going into 2022? Is it all grim? Like, is there any kind of like positive aspects to draw from this? Like, is there anything that can be improved?
I think again, like the level of engagement between the operators and the regulators. Like I think that's my hope, at least, that we will like try to build and establish this relationship to be again part of the solution rather than being enforced with different restrictions from a marketing perspective or from again a player limit perspective or like player protection measures, right? That would be my hope. Like the outlook, to be honest, is a little bit dark, right? We don't see many positive stories emerging about the concepts of regulation and gambling. I think it was mentioned in many podcasts before that you have hosted as well. Like the gambling industry has very few friends, right? so it's an easy target. We are an easy target. We must accept that. I was recently part of a roundtable discussion around this as well. And my point around this is that we as an industry need to face to the fact that we need to wake up to the fact that we are an easy target for everyone. It's so easy to build a negative story, either or to score some cheap political points by imposing new restrictions. Because in the eye of the receiver, it seems like, okay, you're actually, if you're a politician, for instance, and you impose new limits on whatever gambling product, well, then you're seen as like an enforcer and like you're doing something proactively. But what we have also seen in some of the markets, of course, like Sweden is the most predominant example, I would say, in terms of like the channelization rate that we see in the markets, like the negative effects, the short-term political gains, in my view, doesn't outweigh the long-term negative effect from these changes, right? So I often, and I know, like for instance, again going back to Denmark, like there is a dialogue. There will be most likely some marketing restrictions will be introduced most likely during next year. It's being looked into by the Danish Ministry of Taxation. But the kind of like the negative thing that it will do for the market is, I think, again, they need to be, I hope they will be very careful. I hope they will again include the industry in terms of like finding a good balance, because we can also say again for Sweden, well, was the advertising balance correct? Probably not. But at the same time, regulators must also face it. Like whenever a market gets regulated, like it's like everyone is fighting to gain those initial market shares, right? So of course the marketing spend will increase, and then hopefully it will find like a good level over time. So let's see. It's definitely something to monitor. But like when you see the like the mentionings and the talk, what's being talked about, what's being mentioned, like what are we being compared to? We're being compared to alcohol, cigarettes, like these types of products, right? Then they want to introduce the same restrictions on gambling that we see on these products. But the thing that people tend to forget is that we are an online. It's an online commodity, right? So it's so easy to circumvent, like the regulated sites, right? Whereas if there's an alcohol ban for marketing, for instance, well, it's not easy to go out and finding like illegal booze somewhere, right? You would need some connections, right? I'm not saying it's not possible, but you would need to do a little bit more homework compared to switching on a VPN, going to like an unlicensed site on the internet and depositing and playing without any restrictions, without any limitations at all, right? So going back from a player perspective, like all of these introductions of like limitations, tax raises, in the end, it's the player that gets a less attractive product to play on.
Exactly.
And that's why we see like the players, they go elsewhere. They seek alternatives, right? Either within the industry, in our licensed sites, or they like completely give up on it, right? Because it's simply not worth the hassle.
Yeah, and like this is also like comparing to our American neighbors, the fact that they've been very good at proactively working with the regulators, with the politicians, let's say, to get the legislation right in the various states. And okay, maybe there are exceptions to that. New York, obviously, with really high taxation rates, and Florida, that kind of introduced a monopoly to start with. But take Florida as a good example of the power of a consortium of operators. When they come together, they can actually make change. Because what happened in Florida essentially is that a consortium of operators, they went together and they used $20 million in a lobbyist efforts, basically, to change the legislation and to withdraw that monopoly that was awarded to the Seminole tribe, essentially, that was operated by Hard Rock, essentially to open up that market. And $20 million is a lot of money. I mean, and they can make things happen with that money over in the US. Looking at Europe, and it's something that interests me, and in general, is that we haven't seen the same cooperation between competitors in various markets. There are industry organizations, Denmark, obviously, you have yours, Doga, of course. But they seem to me to be operating with a lot more limited resources.
Yes.
Is that something that is holding the industry back in Europe, do you think? Do you think that the industry needs to be better at cooperation, or?
Yes, again going back to like the common acceptance or acknowledgement of like the role that we play as an industry, right? I think that would hopefully encourage more cooperation around this. I would say I don't fully agree that we don't see any cooperations, right? I think again in Sweden, Bose and Pierre has been very, very vocal in terms of like at least trying to find a decent, good common ground and try to reach an understanding as well with the political sphere. In Denmark, we've seen examples of operators going together, producing marketing campaigns, dedicating 5-10% of their advertising budget to launch a common joint TV campaign, right? To inform players, politicians, other media that like the system that we have there, the regulation that we have is actually working in our favor, rather than we need to impose more restrictions and reduce like the attractiveness of the product compared to these offshore sites, right? So I think there are examples. The effect of them, haven't been seen. But then again, that goes into what we talked about earlier, like the political climate, because at the end of the day, the regulators are bound by the politic winds that are happening, right? So is there like a positive wind going on? Like what type of approach does the government has, the running government that is in place? Is it like pro, against? Is it liberal? Is it the Democrat? What's the approach, right? So I would say yes, we could work closer together. We could, like, as an industry, again, if we pool like the resources that we have in terms of like marketing, right? We could buy all the media and almost for a month or two in the year, and then like and advertise this and be proactive about it and show also all the good things that we deliver to society in terms of like tax revenue generated, or again, amount of media investments that are being made by our companies, or sponsorships of leagues or players or clubs, like all that stuff that tends to be forgotten, again, to score some cheap political points.
Yeah. Maybe it is a cultural thing in general, with the US being much closer to the decision makers than what we can be here
Maybe,
in Europe, because
yeah, I think you're
as a
right.
pure capitalist nation as the US is,
Yeah.
kind of money talks in a lot of ways, and
Yeah.
it seems to me that the European culture is much more like towards the socialistic side, where it's much more difficult to just use X amount of money in order to change legislation here, and the politicians are much more in tune with their voters rather than the corporations who would donate to their political funds, so to say. For better and for worse, perhaps. But
yes,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And we like the outlook for the European markets. Again, we have the UK, like you mentioned in the beginning, right, revising their 2005 Gambling Act to cover a more modern take on like what has happened since 2005. So I would say it's definitely due time to look at this because a lot of things have happened since 2005, right?
Yeah.
But again, we have seen introductions or proposals from members of parliament of £2 bet limits, stake limits, similar to what they have in the betting shops, £100 spend limits. Again, these things will look good and, like, from a logical point of view, makes sense. But what will happen is that it will drive the players to offshore companies,
offshore sites.
Yes.
And it's just a question if the regulators will ever understand that, rather if the voters will understand this issue at the end of the day, because from a surface level, as you are saying, from a surface level, as you say, it's very much of the optics of the politicians. They are trying to make a career, and a name for themselves, and the industry becomes an easy target. And as long as the voters don't understand the issues of channelization, then I guess we won't see a reversal of these headwinds.
Exactly, and I think again it's a very, very good point again about the differences between like the US and Europe, right? Where we as an industry perhaps should focus maybe less on the politician side of things and focus more on the end users, like convincing them that like the systems that we have in place are good and in their favor, that we can offer an attractive product. They feel safe because we are monitored by the authorities. So like that could maybe be the lesson for the European side of the industry, like is to focus a lot on this, right? We've seen some good examples as well recently, right? So again, my main media exposure is from the Danish market. And we have seen examples of operators there, like Mr. Green, who I think they were the first to introduce like a dedicated TV spot that only talks about like the player protection tools that they have available from Green Gaming, right? We've seen social media presence like Bet365 that do dedicated tweets that only contain information about what you should do if you think you have a problem gambling. Do a self-test, links to more advice and information, and like stuff like this is like again a trend that I think will expand into other markets where we see similar issues. Again, Sweden, I know that I think also Mr. Green has expanded into other territories using the same approach, and I think that's where we as an industry become more balanced, that we become less aggressive on the like sell bonus, we become more informative, right? So we can never eradicate the like the selling messages, but we should find a better balance, and I think these are good examples of like an interesting and healthier development, at least from my point of view, as to what we will see moving forward.
Absolutely. So Peter, if we look at some of the individual markets within Europe, the hottest ones, like especially like Netherlands and Germany, obviously close to each other, and Netherlands in particular is interesting because obviously many of the major operators have been forced to withdraw from the market until they have secured their license. And I think something that is a bit underestimated from investment point of view as well. I think investors are underestimating the likes of Kindred and Betsson being moot in that market for the next 9 months, more or less.
Because because like that has been disappearing for at least a couple of years, right? That kind of like revenue stream. So when they introduced this, I totally agree. Of course, Netherlands is an attractive market. We know that the players there, they enjoy both sports betting. There, it's a rather mature market, I would say, also for online casino, right? So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right in terms of like what will happen. It's been a little bit of a clunky start, I would say, to the introduction of the regulation. But it was the same case we saw in Sweden. It was the same case in Denmark. It's like it needs to kind of like find its too weak, and all the different
learning by failures.
Set up. Yeah, exactly right. The crooks system like not working on the day of the launch. But yes, I would definitely say that's one of the markets to really pay a close attention to. I think a lot more operators will go into that sphere. So I'm expecting a lot more licenses to be issued in the near future.
But one thing that is important to one thing that I think is important to remember, especially if you are an investor in this space, in the likes of Kindred and Betsson and so on, is when they go live again, it's not like they will generate the same amount of revenue as they did pre-regulation from day one, and not just the fact that they are more restricted and there is taxation coming into force, but it's also the fact that they are not allowed to use their previous database, right? And I think if you, for example, Kindred and Betsson, it's going to take a long time for them to build up liquidity in that market again.
Yes, and again, it's the same pattern that we have seen in Denmark going back to 2012 when that was introduced. There's like these kind of like gold rushes to get there first, try to secure a large piece of the pie. So like early on, the investments won't pay dividends, but again, the long run, it's a much more stable market, of course, with no payment blocks in the horizon. There are no IP blocks or whatever things that can pop up in unregulated markets, right? So like from an investment point of view, yes, it will be an immediate hit to the bottom line, but again, long term, it's going to be for the benefit of all. That's my prediction.
Yeah, good. And what about Germany? I mean, the dust has settled since the re-regulation came into force here in the summer, somewhat at least. What would you say is the current status of Germany, and what are your expectations for 2022 from an operator point of view?
Yeah. Again, Germany is a very interesting case, right? Of a very, very messy process leading up to the actual introduction of the legislation. The interim regime has been also a bit messy. A lot of bigger operators have withdrawn, they have closed down parts of their product. The market maturity is I would say is quite low still, right? So there is definite potential there, but again, with the restrictions that have been imposed from the get-go in the market, and I'm talking now especially about the casino restrictions that have been put in place for the transitional measures, it makes it a very, very, very tough business case for operators to kind of buy into and see the real value in it. And again, what we talked about now many times, again, what will this actually happen for the player? Is it interesting for a player that likes to play live casino, that you cannot play live casino in a licensed market? It makes, in my view, very, very little sense. And again, it drives players to other destinations rather than staying within a checked, regulated, and healthy, hopefully, environment. And the same about, again, the product features that they introduced, the limits they have imposed as well on the product side, right? So I would say we will see like what the impact will be of if it will be like a more sports driven market, or we will see again a massive like low channelization into the regulated side of things in terms of online casino, and maybe a much higher rate for the sports side of the business. It remains to be seen. I think again, the more restrictions you impose, the real winners are the like offshore companies.
Yeah, absolutely. And flying across the pond again to the US here. I mean, we've seen.
Do we get the frequent flyer miles on this? Like
back
flying
and forth. Yeah. yeah. If we got a frequent flyer mile for every time we mentioned
exactly.
across the pond, will be set for life. I think, Peter. But
yeah, exactly.
Good.
No, yeah, you're right.
But yes, by all means, let's add that to our account. We can call Lufthansa later and see if we can claim that. But
exactly.
For now, if we go over again then to the pond and into the US, tier 2 operators, Betson, have announced that they are not going into hardcore on the B2C side. They will enter one state, which is Colorado, but they will be focusing on B2B. And I met Jesper Svensson in the US, and he's selling his B2B product with it for the first time in his career. And Betson is kind of shape shifting in that regard over in that market. At the same time, they have one of their biggest competitors, Kindred, who is going full force B2C with lackluster results, you could say so far. And at the same time, on the tier 1 side, we have the likes of DraftKings, who are still massively bleeding in the US market, and there's still a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity of how this is actually going to turn out in the US. So I'm going to ask you the very humble question here, Peter. What's your predictions for the US market and its operators and suppliers for 2021? Please, can you give us an answer?
Ooh, that's a big one. If I can I get like a consultancy fee for that would make me like a rich man, I think. No.
You can do it retroactively, so in a year's time, either it's
exactly. No, you're right. No, I would say from the operational side of things, we will see these changes again, like going into these markets again. There will be it's a different culture. Like you mentioned this yourself in the beginning as well, right? It's a very, very different culture. We cannot, as European operators, just go there with our brands and think like, they will just adopt it. It's going to be fantastic. Everything is going to be working like it does in Europe. Like it is a completely different culture and pattern that these players have. It's a different preference that they have. Right. So the localization of the products, adapting them to the local routines and like, again, skill levels, that like the maturity of the product. Do we need 5,000 lines of betting on each game, or do we like need to focus on, okay, maybe it's more the odds side we need to adjust? Like it's like these subtle things, I think, will be a massive difference. And I think, again, what we've seen in Europe again is like the UX part, like the player experience of like, is it going through is it a tedious process to go in and place a bet? Like, again, if you have to scroll through 5,000 lines of bet lines, is that really an encouraging experience on a mobile, or should you just focus on like a more simplified but more attractive product? Again, it's to be seen. Like the race that we've seen in Europe is like, okay, we need as much betting lines out there, but like when we actually do analysis of what's actually being bet on, right, it's like 90% of it is like distributed between 10 different lines, right? So maybe we need to focus on that.
Yeah, something I find interesting in the American market is whenever we talk to American operators or suppliers or experts in that market, they talk a lot more from like a really innovative perspective. Like they have a different way to see the market, because it's been moving so quickly for the Americans that they are asking like what's behind the door, like what's the next paradigm shift for them. And whereas the European market, the European operators tend to be more traditional and slow moving, let's say, and more iterative, so to say. And you know, and one of these kind of paradigm shifts that I think will be really interesting for 2022 is we've talked about this many times now in the podcast, but I think 2022 will be the coming out year for streaming services who will be integrating sports betting into the product, where the viewer, the user, is not there to place a bet, but they will be presented with the option to place a bet if they want to. If they don't, that's okay as well. So for the likes of DAZN, for example, DAZN or however you pronounce them, they hired Shay Segev a year ago, and now they are announcing their plans that they are now moving into the next phase of the life of DAZN, which will be a community-driven streaming platform where you can also place bets. So it's like a paradigm shift for that streaming service that affects our industry. Let's say, and then the question is, what happens to the traditional sports books, like the Bet365, for example, when all of a sudden you have these streaming services?
Exactly. Like, will they completely skip this again, the European style of gambling, and just move into this social sphere of betting? That's definitely a very, very interesting point that you bring up, I think, and it's definitely something that I think all operators are monitoring very, very closely. What will happen? We see also like transitions in like, for instance, the online casino products, right, where we again introduce streaming elements or like shared playing. So like this convergence of like what we have seen 15 years ago in online poker and online bingo with chat rooms, like that, stuff like that is being introduced now into online casino, right? And now it's of course video driven, but it's still like the same. And what we've seen like with Twitch streamers and like the social experience of playing online casino is a hugely interesting trend that we should obviously pay very, very close attention to moving forward. And like you say, in the US, like, it's actually funny because 10 years ago in Denmark, when the market was regulating there, we saw a Danish telco buying the majority share of an online gambling company, right? And they were also had a very big like TV cable service as well. But they never managed to fully integrate it into the product, into the, let's say, the TV set-top boxes. That was like what everyone was paying attention to at the time. Or would they introduce it like, so you would just flipping around in your TV channels and you would see a sports match, you would see a live odds, and you could just like from your remote place bets like yes, no, I will take next to score, it will be Brøndby or whoever we were playing at the time. Like, adding these elements, like if you can fully integrate it into other experiences to enrich the experience, those will be, I think, what you asked for before. Those will be the winners, I think. Again, so again, the whole like perspective on the social side of things, again, driven by DraftKings and their predominantly very, very social and engaging product. If they can merge this into like, let's say, live broadcasts, well, that's where it becomes really, really interesting, right?
Yeah, and even the likes of ESPN Plus, for example, which is you know, a massive streaming platform in the US owned by Disney. And you know, going back to this again, Disney have spoken about this in the quarterly earnings calls, that sports betting is not something that is stigmatized anymore, and Disney is open now to launch to launch themselves into the sports betting side of things. And you know, I think like when these massive conglomerates start entering the market, it's like it's gonna be difficult for a traditional sports book in the US to compete with that, because ESPN obviously have massive amount of streaming rights
right?
in the
yeah, exactly.
subscriber base and streamer rights in the US, and the likes of Kindred and others are not going to be able to stream the games the way that ESPN Plus can, for example, and like how do you compete against that when ESPN Plus will be able to attract a demographic that would never sign up to an online sportsbook with its complexity and so on.
But again, I think you're absolutely right, and like again, going back to what happened in the Danish market, what we saw again, like what we've seen now in the US with the NFL and the NHL, the NBA, like doing partnership deals with sportsbook operators, like official sportsbook partners. I think it's DraftKings for the NFL, for instance. Massive deal, right? What is going to happen between, again, if you have image rights and video rights for production that ESPN has for broadcasting NFL, and then you have a betting partnership with DraftKings, which is like a conflict of interest, right? How will the legal side of things, will ESPN actually be allowed to offer this service on top of their product? If again, DraftKings goes to the NFL and say, we have an exclusive agreement, right? We obviously don't know the nitty-gritties of the contractual details, but what we saw in the Danish market, and when it regulated in 2012, was there were like broadcasting rights, and then there are the actual rights to like the league, the sport, the player images and stuff like that, and those are two different things. So if you can actually say like place or offer a sports betting product when you don't have the actual right, you only have rights to broadcasting, can you actually do that? That's like at the end, I think, in all sorts of life, the lawyers win, because they will get to kind of like iron out the contractual stuff, right?
Yeah, fair enough. And I mean, on that note, we mentioned here DAZN before as well, and not only is DAZN implementing sports betting within their streaming service, but they're also going community based, right? They want to build a community within their streaming service, and that leads into kind of my next question for you, Peter, which is community building within the iGaming industry. And my good friend Carolina Pelk is starting Beyond Play, which is a B2B product on this space, and also Robin Eric Reed has launched Live Spins, which is their take on the Twitch streaming community trend and so on. And they are very purposefully saying that it's not about who builds the best product. It's not about who is the first, but it's about who can build the community that is going to win in this space. So I would love to go into this topic as well on the social aspect of social casino, social gambling. There's also an argument to be made that that casino or gambling inherently is not social, and I guess it remains to be seen if these products are going to be successful. But I would like to leave it over to you. Like, what's your expectation on this trend that is emerging on social casino, and how do you think it will play out?
Again, I think it's a paradigm shift, right? It's a paradigm shift that we're witnessing, and I think again that's going to be one of the key things to, like, if you have like a bullet list, that's definitely one to keep an eye on, right? Because breaking down these, when I mentioned in the beginning around like the social stigmas that are associated with gambling, if again you can build the community, and we've seen it, like we see this in basically all markets. We see it on the affiliation side, like whoever can build a community of people who are interested in either online casino games or sports betting or both, or poker, whatever. Like, if you have the community, then you have power, right? If you can merge the two, so if you can kind of bridge the product side of things with the community, if you can bridge that's definitely strong. Now, what I would like to object against is the notion that the product doesn't win ultimately, that it doesn't matter, like the product is not the most important thing to me. And based on at least on my experience, like we see that the product ultimately is the deciding factor, right? What we see is that whenever we do surveys of players, like what is the most important thing to you, it's the basic stuff ultimately, right? It's like the deposits and withdrawals are fast. That the UX is good and smooth. That you can place your bet fast without any delays. So these are the basic things that you need to cover, right? And then like if you manage to succeed in that, you're in a much stronger position, I think, than having a big community with a subpar product.
But I would like to challenge that argument a bit,
Please.
if I may, because I think we are saying that from the perspective of online casinos traditionally being quite lonely product. So we haven't seen exactly the social product being rolled out successfully yet. So right now it's basically you interactive with the UX UI. So yes, you're right. The product is everything. But think about this: if you are starting a competitor to Tinder, as we all know, and you build the best product in the world on an online dating, and then you ask a user to go into that product, and there's no one there. Then what does it matter if it's the best product?
Exactly, but you like, in my view, in order to get the big community, you need the good product, right? So it's like a chicken and egg kind of thing. Like, what do you need first? I think it's very difficult to build a big community if you don't have a good product. That's kind of like my point. Yeah. Even though, okay, please.
Yeah, so I'll give you another analogy on this as well. Okay. So we come from the nightclub world, right? And we organized in our previous life. We organized a lot of parties and events and so on and so forth. And we had a principle in those events, and that principle was very simple, because we asked ourselves the question, like, what makes a great party? Is it the coolest light systems? Is it like the coolest decor in the nightclub? Is it the best location of the nightclub, for example? But the principle was very simple. People go where other people are. So we had this principle where it doesn't matter if we have 4 blank white walls and a shitty sound system. If the right people are there, then others will follow. And
yes. But will they stay there? That's the important thing. Will they stay there?
Yeah. And in the nightclub world, even if you build a following to the coolest, newest nightclub, it's a lifespan of the crowd, like the hip crowd. They are there for a while, like for 1 or 2 years, and then they move on to the next place, and like the next sort of place. But the coolest promoters, the coolest places, of the coolest promoters, it was almost like an anti-culture where like the places were a bit like shitty, let's say, but it was just the cool people were there, and the other cool people wanted to be there as well, so to say. So I'm not sure, to be honest with you, in community building, I would say that it's more about like, how can you ensure that you get the right people to your to be at the right place at the right time in order to build a successful group of people that interact with each other.
Exactly. So but again, but like going back to your example with Tinder, right? It was inherently a good product experience from the get-go, right? So how did Revolut grow? Like, they grew through a fantastic, like, personally the best onboarding experience I've ever seen. Like, if I could replicate that to the online industry, that would be fantastic. Like, you would be miles ahead of a lot of the industry, right? So as I see it, if you don't have like the basic stuff in order, if you don't serve, you could have, again, the coolest people promoting your product, but it will be like putting lipstick on a pig, right? So ultimately it will wear off, right? So that's but it's gonna be, we can almost like again, we should like put a date in the book and then go back and revisit this in a year's time from now to see how the developments have progressed. It's gonna be definitely
exactly. It's just a very interesting topic to talk about. Like, how do you build a community? And there's a marketing growth term that is called the cold star problem, which it basically says that if you build a really great product, oftentimes it becomes a lone star, like a lone very bright star. It looks amazing, but it's by itself, right? Because you need that. You need to cross that threshold of a number of people if it's community based.
Exactly, critical mass, right?
where the community takes care of itself, where it grows by itself, right? And so there was discussions around this in Silicon Valley in the 2000s, like there were like the same small group of people in the 2000s that were able to create these incredible products, and people ask themselves like, what secret, what's the secret behind it, like is it on the US front, the UI? And what they realize is like, no, it's not like they are incredible developers, it's just that many of these products were spawned out of the universities. So Facebook,
and again the social experience, right?
And so they created this like atomic community from one from one university that spread to 2, that spread to 4, 8, and they reached a critical mass in a small demographic that then spread into. And Tinder was the same then. So Tinder started in a university, right? And you don't have to spend like millions and millions of dollars to target the entire nation, and then kind of you build from there.
Exactly, the product speaks for itself, right? It's like a viral effect almost. Like let's not go into the whole COVID discussion now, but yes, it's. But you're absolutely right. And how to actually like hit on this, right? Again, I would still argue again that the foundation needs to be the product, right? You need to do your homework. You need to do. Like have a product that is localized. That's what we're working on here at Soft2Bet is like going into these, when we go into a market, like we want to go hyper local, right? We want to make sure that we have people on board that are have a cultural understanding of what's like the unique traits of this market, right? So that we know, for instance, in under the Swedish license, where we know what actually we have Swedish people on board who understands what Swedish people talk about, what they respond to, what's being talked about in the media, what, like, again, for the community building side of things, you need to like ears and eyes on the ground, right? So that's definitely, like, and one of the good things about like next year to keep an eye out is, again, how does operators adapt? When you asked about Kindred, how do they adapt to the US market, like the media channels that are available? Where are people talking? Is it TikTok? Like, has the conversation moved over there now? What do we need to do to like accommodate this? Yeah, a lot of open questions and very few answers, I'm afraid.
Yeah, exactly. No, but that's what's interesting, I think, because on this social casino trend, it forces the industry to view the marketing efforts and growth efforts from a different perspective, because again, it is about the critical mass, and as you're saying, the product is really important to get right, and also the community building aspect is something that the industry has never done before, right? It's been an inherently private. Or
but I think so. Like again, if you look at a product like the poker community, right? I think there are examples in the industry, right?
That's a good point.
Where you can build a product around, and again, who ended up there, like being the, like, again, when you get the critical mass and you get more people to follow, well, it followed the strongest product in the end, right? So.
True.
I think, so let's see. But there are examples, and we see, again, huge Facebook groups or like other social media groups of players that are interested in the products that we offer. And if you can, again, build a bridge like they're working on with Beyond Play and what we're working on with the live spins, like, again, if you can transfer that community into our sphere, then that's a very, very strong formula for success, I think. So if Facebook decides to go into gambling at some point, then we need to pay attention.
True. Let's speak about RG, responsible gambling. We've been in the industry, both of us, for a long time, Peter, and we've seen a shift from RG being kind of in the corner and like a necessary evil in many ways, to being front and center within the organizations that we see, and so. We made great stride as an industry, especially on the European side. You mentioned here before that the Americans still have some ways to go. But what do you see as some of the trends within RG for 2022?
I think what has been worked on by many operators in the past as well is like having better tools available to actually be able to monitor in real time what players, how they behave, how they interact with the products. So like all this like artificial intelligence, like how you can train through algorithms and to like flag these players early on to put in the effort needed. And again, a more proactive and personalized approach to this, I think, is going to be one of the things, again, that we will continue to work on as an industry, right? So we've seen many operators introducing measures such as this. And it's going to be like it's going to continue. It's going to continue, I think, and for the good of ultimately, like for the benefit of the player, which is ultimately what we want.
Yeah, and so the likes of Kindred, for example, have set out this very ambitious goal that they want to eliminate harmful gambling by 2023. Using basically AI and machine learning systems in order to detect and prevent
I think that's
yes. Yeah. Do you think that is ever going to happen, or are they basically wishing for something that is not going to come true?
I mean, if you set the goal of that, then definitely it's achievable, right? It's what you put behind it, right? So if you put the right tools and the right people in place, then it's definitely achievable. It's definitely achievable. How it will impact, again, the businesses and like the bottom line and all that stuff, it needs to be like a business decision, a conscious decision made by the business saying, this is what we believe as a company that betting on this in the long term will benefit us, right? And this gives us a competitive edge because then we are perceived as the operator that takes the most care of our players and has the most player interest at heart, right? So I think it's a conscious decision. It's a business decision like any other USP that you want to put out there in order to promote your product. Like, again, Mr. Green has done here in Denmark with dedicated TV spots or out-of-home campaigns highlighting green gaming. It's like these things are becoming front and center because these are also the things that we get when we see these bad stories, right? We want to highlight all the tools that are available, either both from on our side, but also available to the player, that they can just pick and choose like what they want, set responsible limits, only bet with what you can, and ultimately you'll be like taken care of, right? So I think RG, yes, will become an increasingly important USP for many operators. How we do it, operator to operator, will be different. There will also be, again, regulatory measures coming in, most likely. But it's definitely one of the most important things to pay attention to in the next year. We've mentioned quite a few important things now, haven't we? Just
yes,
like
exactly.
if I remember back to the list, right?
So, absolutely, we have, and we're gonna start rounding off here in a little bit, Peter. But sure. We cannot go through a prediction podcast without at least mentioning a little bit on the crypto side as well. It's selfish of me, of course, because it's something that I'm quite interested in.
You invested maybe also?
Yes, I am. Like in a stupid, like, yeah. I mean, it's like, it's one of those funny things. I'll tell you a funny story, Peter. Like I bought this like ridiculous NFT for like, I mean, it's not like crazy amount of money, but like stupid amount of money for what it is. Let's say it's a pixelated JPEG, and someone told me like, what the hell did you do this for? And I said, for me, it's a win-win because either this crazy NFT hype continues and it increases in value, kind of thing, and everyone's happy, and I look like a genius, although it has nothing to do with that. I honestly don't know what's going to happen. Or it crashes down to zero, more or less, and I lose my money. But I said, if that happens, then whenever I meet a friend in the future and my friend has a bad day, he's sad, something shitty happened. They broke up with their girlfriend, or they lost money on a bet or something like that. Then I can always say, well, I feel really bad for you, but remember the time I bought a pixelated JPEG for way too much money, and now it's worth nothing, right? Your day could be worse. Yeah, so it's a win-win. I make my friend feel better.
It's again, it's like placing a bet. It's like it's very, very close to the industry you work in, right? So you're absolutely right. It's a gamble. It's a gamble like anything else. You want to get in at the ground floor, and then hopefully scrape out the big win in the end. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But what will happen with like the whole crypto, the payment sphere, like that's also like again very, very close and hard to us. Yeah, exactly. Yes. It's you cannot separate the two, right? Without payments, you don't have any gambling, right? So it's this is so closely like tied in together.
Yes.
I mean, what we have seen so far, at least based on our experience here, is like there has been, like it's just at the verge of like breaking through, like the mainstream, right? Getting over that, like so to speak, hump of like the reservations that people inherently have in new payment methods that are not tied to gold reserves, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
like. But when we see like countries introducing cryptocurrency as official currencies of the land, that's when we begin to break down the barriers, right? And that's also where we can tie the two things closer together within our sphere, right? And even like betting on like crypto prices could be a thing for the future as well, like so you can double hedge your bets or whatever you want to do, right? it's so interesting. But like from your perspective, like what are your predictions for this whole sphere, since you're like you have a personal interest and a financial interest in this as well?
I mean, I think it's a 5-hour conversation in its own right in general. But let me just say, I think that this can go many different directions in general, this space. And what is interesting is the expression NFT is the expression, I heard it the first time in February, right? That's like 9 months ago. I mean, and since then, it has exploded, like it massively exploded. And I think that the way we view NFTs today as digital art, more or less, is not what we will view it in 12 months' time. I think the use case for NFTs are much deeper than just for digital art. It is essentially something you can like verifying ownership in general on the blockchain is something quite powerful that I think there is so much experimentation happening right now on this.
And some will fail, like in all of the
many
some
will fail,
some will crash, and like we will see scandals like again where like we saw in the spring of this year with football index in the UK, for instance, like a completely different take on an existing concept of sports betting, right? Which ultimately failed, and of course it's a sad story for all the people that lost a lot of money, right? But like these things will happen, and it will happen in the same space here. Like you say, digital art. That's just, in my view, it's just a starting point. Like so this is again the ground floor. It will expand, it will balloon, it will spill over into other effects, into other industries, into other like interactions with us as a human race. Wow, that's like
exactly. Exactly. That's it, and rewinding the tape back to 1999, and we saw a similar craze in the fact that investors and the world realized that the internet is going to be the future.
Yes.
And so investment was flowing into the space. Money was cheap. Whoever had anything product to do with the internet immediately got funding, and that is what is happening now in the crypto space as well. Whoever has an interesting idea will be funded right now, and so clearly it is showcasing the same type of bubble effects as the dot-com bubble eventually when it burst in the year 2000. And what's interesting to point out about the dot-com bubble in the 99-2000 is that just because the bubble burst didn't mean that the internet was not the future. It just meant that investors were kind of overvaluating the value in that very point. So, for example,
it wasn't ready. It wasn't
Amazon,
ready to that level. Yeah, exactly. It wasn't
Amazon,
ready to like,
Amazon. It took Amazon 10 years to recover their share price from the year 1999 as they peaked, and they didn't recover until like 2008, 2007, 2008 before the next bubble burst, basically. So I think we'll see something similar in the crypto space as well, where these insane price hikes on NFTs and general valuations of crypto-based organizations, many of them will fail, and eventually a bubble will burst, and we'll see a correction. And it might take years and years and years before these genuine products reach the same valuations as they have today or tomorrow or next year, because this bubble might continue for another year or 2 years or 3 years, or maybe the bubble will never burst. Who knows? But it's such.
Or maybe, like you say, maybe it will balance out. Like in the end, reality will catch up to the hype, right?
Exactly.
And we will avoid it.
But but the point is, like, there's so much experimentation happening that it's almost like a digital renaissance in a way, and this is flowing over to the iGaming industry as well, where many operators and suppliers are all asking themselves right now, how can we leverage this technology? And many, they don't have exposure, they don't have in-house expertise, so they are trying to desperately find individuals or consultants who can help them to brainstorm and to go on this experimental journey that might not lead anywhere, but it might also lead to some really cool new products. And I think in a year's time, when we do a new yearly review here, Peter, then I think we'll have
year in your review,
much better answers. We'll have much better answers to where those where that experimentation will lead, because the long story short is, like, we just don't know where the technology will go so far. There are some really cool ideas. Decentralized sports betting platforms are being launched at the moment, and lots of these cool things, and NFT drops within slot games, and Evolution launching their NFT Megaway, which is not really an NFT slot. It's just kind of like they bought a couple of NFTs and built a slot as well. But it's like,
but leaving and trying to include and emerge these, like, how can we again as an industry absorb these trends, right? How can we enhance the product offering that we have, our relevance, because that's ultimately the end point. We want to stay relevant. We want to have a product offering that is relevant to the audience. So yes, much more time, money, and effort will be invested into like trying to find the golden formula to how to merge these things into something that ultimately brings value to the players.
That's absolutely true, Peter. So let's start running off a little bit here. I mean, the only thing I wanted to end the podcast today a little bit on Soft2Bet. I mean, before the podcast here, you mentioned that a year ago I had the pleasure of doing a podcast with your CEO Boris.
Yes.
And at that point, you were about like 400 or so employees, and you mentioned here before the podcast that like now you are like 900 people. And I mean, Soft2Bet obviously exploding. I mean, it must be one of the fastest growing organizations in the entire industry, more or less. And so that begs the question, like, what's next for Soft2Bet now? Like, how do you see? What's your prediction for Soft2Bet in 2022?
I don't see us like really slowing down. To be honest, that's not really been the MO since I joined, right? Yeah. So again, when I talked about license, we have currently 2 licenses that we operate with. My prediction for 2022 will be that we will have many more. We will launch into many more markets, expand our product offerings, and enhance the product offerings that we have. So that's definitely what we want to focus on. Again, ultimately, we want to make sure that we are competitive in each market we go into with a localized, adapted product that is competitive to like the more established operators in the markets. Because let's face it, like some of the markets we are looking at has been relatively mature for a while. It was the same case in Sweden when we launched there in what was that, in April 2020. But we have like gradually taken market shares bit by bit, and that's what we want to do in these markets as well. So from our end, we want to, I would say, continue the growth. Maybe not an exponential rate that we have seen so far in the past couple of years, but let's see. Maybe we will be 2,000 when we do our 2023 predictions next year. So let's see. It's going to be very, very interesting to follow us here, and I'm very, very happy to be part of it. It's an exciting adventure we're on, for sure.
Yeah. I had the pleasure to be invited to the Soft2Bet party here a couple of months ago.
That was a 5-year, yeah, exactly.
In Limassol, and my expectation and my prediction is that the 2022 party will be even bigger and better. So I'm the invitation. I'm waiting for it, and hopefully I can be there next year again.
Exactly. I look forward to that as well myself.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Peter. It's been great to reconnect here after all these years, yes. And looking forward to follow up on this conversation again.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor to be here with a living iGaming legend. So yes, thank you so much for having me, and I hope to see you again.
All right. Thanks, Peter. Take care.